Welcome to Scarlet Tavern. Grab a drink, take a seat, and let's begin. Today, we'll be delving into the disturbing story of the Anthill Kids, a Canadian cult led by Roch Theriault. This episode contains descriptions of abuse and violence, so listener discretion is advised. Let's uncover the dark truth behind the Anthill Kids. This is Scarlet Tavern. Alright. This is a rough one, folks, so as we said, viewer discretion or listener discretion is advised.
What about narrator discretion? This is bad.
What about researcher discretion?
In all honesty, I forgot to give both of you warnings on how bad the Anthill Kids were. I've studied them like crazy, and I just forgot to tell you guys, but we are going to French Canada, and which is where all the issues start. I mean, any issue in the world starts in
at least for Canadian issues.
French Canadians. But we're going to Quebec.
For our listeners in Canada and in Quebec, you know we're telling the truth.
And yes. Ontario.
No one cares about Ontario.
No, it's not a real place. It's like Australia.
At least Northern Ontario.
It's like Australia.
Yeah. Wait, isn't he from Ontario?
Yeah, from
Ontario. He's from Quebec.
Oh, that's true.
Well, folks, this was
I'm sorry. He's from Toronto.
Well, folks, this is my last episode with Scarlet Tavern. See you later.
Wow.
Dude.
Breaking shit.
Yep, that's right.
Breaking all my stuff.
Yeah.
So, the Anthill Kids cult, also known as the Roch Theriault cult, was a notorious group led by Roch Theriault in Ontario, Canada during the 1970s and 1980s. Theriault, a charismatic yet deeply disturbed individual, formed the cult around his belief that he was a prophet of God. He attracted followers with promises of spiritual enlightenment and a utopian lifestyle. However, the reality of life within the cult was far from idyllic. Theriault imposed strict rules and punishments, often using extreme violence to maintain control over his followers. He claimed to possess healing powers and perform crude, often harmful medical procedures on his followers, leading to numerous injuries and deaths. The Anthill Kids cult gained infamy for its brutal practices, including beatings, mutilations, and even forced amputations. Theriault's grip over his followers was so strong that they endured these atrocities out of fear and a twisted sense of loyalty. Roch Theriault, born May 16, 1947, in Rivière-du-Moulin, Quebec, and raised in Thetford Mines, had a deeply ingrained religious background. His father, a farmer and member of the Pèlerins de Michel, Barrets Blancs, adhered to a conservative Catholic movement loyal to the Pope, but later rejected the reforms of the Second Vatican Council. Theriault's upbringing included accompanying his father on door-to-door fundraising to distribute the Beret Blanc literature. At 18, Theriault turned away from his Catholic upbringing and began exploring esoteric interests. He later recounted in his prison-written biography a childhood incident where he claimed to have been raised by a she-bear in the Abitibi woods after she rolled him over and adopted him as her cub. This early exposure to nature may have contributed to his later interest in shamanic indigenous medicine.
This is weird.
I highly suggest for those interested in researching this without getting to the dark stuff, read his book, because you can find it anywhere. His book is, I will tell you the title. I forget what it is.
Yeah, I didn't come across it because I was too mentally disturbed by half the shit I was reading.
It is called The Savage Messiah. And
which they also made into a movie.
Correct.
I didn't know that was his book.
Yeah. I never saw that movie, but I remember seeing that in, like, funny enough, I remember seeing that in Blockbuster. It was in the horror section, and I was like, what is this? This looks scary.
So, Theriault's diverse interests led him to join the Aramis Association, a Masonic lodge in Thetford Mines in 1973. Now, just to save my family name, who have all been Masons through history, I'm the first one to not join the Masons. Not all Masons are bad. Just putting it out there. The Masonic Temple, everybody thinks they're part of conspiracies and all of this, that they're part of that they go alongside with the Templars and that they've altered history and things like that. No. The essential belief behind the Freemasons is groups of men getting together to support a common goal. That is all it is. So don't let him joining a Masonic lodge, don't let you think that this is what started it, because it's not. He was out of his fucking mind. He claimed that it was here he was introduced to techniques of hypnotism, which would later play a role in his leadership of the Anthill Kids cult. I have never heard of Freemasons doing hypnotism.
Maybe you should join the Freemasons and find out.
All of my family has been to the Freemasons. From what we can gather, my family helped form the Freemasons.
Did they tell you any secrets?
No.
Then you should join and learn some secrets.
As an adult, Theriault claimed that his father would beat him for no apparent reason. I would have too. With how batshit crazy he is.
I mean, freaking running around with bears in the woods in Quebec.
With a she-bear. A neighbor, Leon Vachon, recounted a disturbing quote-unquote game called Bone that Theriault and his father allegedly played. In this game, they would sit at a kitchen table with their boots on and kick each other as hard as they could until one gave in. Vachon also mentioned that Theriault's mother would constantly scream at the 7 children and was described as a piece of work. Can we play Bone?
No. I already messed up my knee today. I don't need you doing anything more to it.
These claims, however, have been disputed by Hyacinth Theriault, Roch's father. Hyacinth. Who names their kid Hyacinth? Well, French-Canadians.
French-Canadians.
Yeah.
Of course. According to him, Roch had never complained about his family beyond what would be considered normal for a child. In 1967, Theriault married Francine Grenier, with whom he had 2 sons, Roch Sylvain and Francois. Roch Sylvain was born in 1969. Francois was born in 1971.
So they'd be about their late 40s, early 50s right about now.
They would 1971, so they would be Francois right now should be 53.
That's about the same age as my mother.
And then
she was born in 69.
Yeah, so they'd be in their mid-50s right now. The boys would later become welcome visitors to the communes Theriault presided over in Gaspé and Ontario, eventually writing a book about their life with their father. However, in 1974, Theriault ended his relationship with Grenier.
This was not a good relationship.
No, very...
whatsoever. If I remember right, Theriault was in his early to mid-20s, and Francine was a teenager.
Yes. Which was, I mean...
Back then it was normal.
Yes.
But...
Considering that he's batshit crazy, this is...
He literally wanted her to be completely modest, which I have no problem with. But then he told her, oh, well, now you have to wear mini skirts and be very, have revealing clothes on.
Yeah.
He was very, very controlling of her.
He became very sex craved.
He was not a fan. He was not well liked by his in-laws.
No.
For all of what I read, also, they just despised him, and I don't blame him.
Soon after, in 1974, Theriault met Giselle Lafrance while selling hand-carved mugs during the Winter Carnival in Quebec City. Could piss them off. Quebec City.
Isn't that how it's pronounced?
No,
That's how the English pronounce it.
That's how we pronounce it. They pronounce it Quebec.
Quebec.
Oh, so Quebec.
Yeah. They began a relationship that would significantly impact Theriault's life and beliefs. In 1970, Theriault developed stomach ulcers, leading to surgery and complications that caused him stomach pains for the rest of his life. Good. This experience intensified his interest in medicine. By the fall of 1976, the pain had become so intense that he squatted in an abandoned house for several months.
Yeah.
During this time, Theriault came into contact with Seventh-day Adventist Church in Thetford Mines.
These people. Sorry to anybody out there who is there. If you're a normal Seventh-day Adventist, please let us know. But also, if you are a Seventh-day Adventist, maybe tell us how you're normal or just regular mainstream Christians.
Everybody else knows, Seventh-day Adventists are fucking batshit crazy.
When the Pentecostals think you're weird, that's when you're...
And I grew up as a Pentecostal youth pastor, and we all thought you were batshit crazy, so...
Yeah, my parents...
While I was speaking in tongues.
My parents kind of forced me away from all of those, like, tables and stuff at the fairs.
Yeah. Blame you. So, attracted to their health programs and Bible prophecy tradition, he joined the church in January 1977. A month later, he claimed to have received a vision predicting the Jonestown Massacre.
Well, obviously,
if you guys have never heard about the Jonestown Massacre, rewind to our first season where we discussed the Jonestown Massacre in multiple parts, which is another very dark one, which we'll probably redo again.
Also, Seventh-day Adventists.
Yes.
Or at least they started off.
Theriault began working as a missionary for Seventh-day Adventists, selling SDA literature and teaching courses on detoxification, which is how to quit smoking, in Thetford Mines in surrounding towns. It would be even funnier if he's sitting there, this is how you learn detoxification. In the summer of 1977, Theriault met 5 of his future followers at SDA events and invited them to move into the apartment he shared with Giselle France. They affectionately addressed him and his girlfriend as Pappy and Mammy, French for Grandpa and Granny.
Which is weird because they really weren't that old.
No, they would have probably been the same age as these followers.
Which is, I kept looking, I was like, okay, that's a weird...
I mean, let alone, he probably didn't ask her if he could move them in.
No, probably not. Then again, after reading a lot of this stuff and some of just from the testimonies of people, I'm not entirely unconvinced that most of these people didn't have their own mental illnesses or issues to begin with.
Most of them do. In 1977, Theriault and Francine Grenier, the first wife, finalized their divorce.
Lucky her.
Following this, Theriault, along with his followers, traveled to Sainte Marie de Bussy, where we probably butchered it, but I don't care. Again, this is French Canada. Jacques Giguère and his wife, Maurice Grenier. Wow.
No relation?
Probably somewhere. That's what caused me to pause.
Yeah,
because I forgot that
when I was reading this, it just kind of like Grenier. It's like I don't think
it didn't even hit me until now.
Well, they may not have been. I mean, it's probably a pretty common French name.
Could be.
It'd be probably like Smith to us. So Giguère would become Theriault's right-hand man. By October of that year, the group had settled in Sainte Marie de Bussy and established a storefront center called Clinique Vivre en Santé, Healthy Living Clinic HLC.
I really don't understand how you got all that. That turned into Healthy Living Clinic.
And it's hilarious. I don't know. It might come up later. That they taught these detoxification courses, but Roch was a raging alcoholic.
Yeah.
Well, so here's the thing. Where does Healthy Living Clinic come in? Because Clinique is clinic, Vivre is living, and Santé is where they're at. So
I don't know where healthy's coming. Yeah,
unless we're wrong. If you speak French, let us know. We may be wrong. None of us speak French, so they continued offering detoxification courses in the counties of Beauce, Binier, Dorchester, and Bellachase.
Well, we know where the English-speaking people in Quebec live.
Dorchester.
In
Dorchester. The HLC's program was based on healthy eating, psychological introspection, and group therapy, offering a 5-day regimen. The clinic gained a positive reputation for hosting free vegetarian banquets for the sick, underprivileged, and handicapped in the area. However, Theriault imposed a strict Sabbatarian schedule on his followers, which included fasting, prayer, meditation, and group confessions. What the fuck is a vegetarian banquet? That's a salad bar.
That's
So I guess with Seventh-day Adventist, it was one of their things is not to eat meat. Like, it's very clean eating.
Well, that just makes them even more psychotic.
So what Theriault did was take a lot of the Seventh-day Adventist stuff and put it into his cult. So that included vegetarianism.
Listen, if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, I'd love to get you on here to hear where all this comes from, because you can't say that being a vegetarian is biblical, because even me being non-religious, I know the Bible well enough to say that, guess what? They all ate meat.
And I'm pretty sure the ancient Hebrews, when they were leaving Egypt, God literally gave them manna and quail. Quail, for those who don't understand, is a bird. Birds are meat.
The only thing they did not eat was pork.
Yep, because
that was it.
That's
Jewish.
Yeah,
but because it was not.
It was seen as unclean.
Yeah, pigs were unclean.
Yeah,
but most of what they ate was lamb, but more than anything. That's why in a lot of like Israeli culture and stuff like that, lamb dishes are so heavy, because lambs were so abundant as opposed to cows.
It's also
lamb chop.
I know. Honestly,
I've
had lamb before, and I'm not a fan of it.
I love it.
I'm not. It's nah.
So in the fall of 1977, Theriault began experiencing visions and dreams about an imminent apocalypse, like every cult. In November, he received a revelation instructing his followers to move to the Gaspé region. Theriault emphasized the severance of ties with relatives who did not immediately accept his apocalyptic prophecies, placing more emphasis on Bible study and group confession.
This is where, obviously, for those who even have the most passing understanding of cults, this is where we've firmly gone onto the path of a cult. He's cutting off apocalyptic visions. This is it. I personally believe this is where Theriault is actually having his real mental breakdown. He's, before everything, while being strict, he's still well within normal boundaries, you know. Prayer meetings, all this other stuff, doing good works in the community. He's still leading his congregation or his prayer group is fine. But now he's like, okay, I'm going batshit crazy now.
So, I think he started losing his mind a little bit more, but Theriault is a control freak.
Yes.
An absolute control freak. So he probably noticed, okay, my members are going to visit family. They're trying to get us out. And there was another thing where a family tried to talk to their daughter, like get their daughter mental help.
I think that was later on, but I know what you're talking about.
It was around this time that she needed mental help, and Theriault kept saying no, 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 no. Finally, the police were involved, and the daughter got seen and said, oh no, she's not crazy, and went back to the cult. But I think with the apocalyptic visions, this just really got him to, now you have to call your families and say, if you don't believe in this, I'm never communicating with you again.
So Theriault married Giselle LaFrance in the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Montreal and began arranging and presiding over marriages between his younger followers. In 1978, a leukemia patient moved into a healthy living clinic but died soon afterward. Theriault claimed to briefly revive her with a breath of life so she could speak her last wishes. In April 1978, Theriault was expelled from the Seventh-day Adventist Church for preaching heretical doctrines. Following this, in June 1978, he described a vision of the group standing at the foot of a mountain, which he believed to be the Gaspé Peninsula of eastern Quebec. Soon after, HLC members began to address Theriault as Moïse, which is Moses in French.
Yep.
And wore handmade unsewn tunics without undergarments. It would actually be Moïse. Because there's no tilde over the E.
It is actually, there's supposed to be 2 dots over that I.
What is the 2 dots called?
I don't know.
An umlaut. The 2 dots that go over a letter is called an umlaut.
Okay, there's supposed to be an umlaut.
So it'd be moise.
Moise. That's right.
The umlaut does the A, and then the moise would be with a tilde. By June, the group had set off for the Gaspé, supporting themselves by offering quit smoking courses in towns along the south shore of the St. Lawrence River. On July 6, 1978, Theriault predicted that the end of the world would occur on February 17th, 1979.
I mean, at least everyone gets to enjoy Valentine's Day last time.
Upon arriving at the Gaspé, the group settled in the woods near New Carlisle, Quebec, at the foot of the mountain Theriault identified as Mont de l'Eternel, their supposed safe haven in the impending apocalypse. So, Mountain of the Eternal.
Yeah.
They adopted the name the Holy Moses Mountain Family, HMMF.
These guys really like their
Every
acronyms.
Every cult. That's why military is a cult. They like their acronyms. With Theriault now being addressed as Moise, the men constructed a large chalet and several log cabins in an open field. In September, Theriault gave his followers new Bible names, symbolizing their new identity as God's chosen ones who had survived destruction by finding shelter on Mont de l'Eternel. However, by the end of the summer, 7 members, including Theriault's 2 sons, left the group and returned to Francine Grenier, Theriault's ex-wife. By October 1978, Theriault had initiated sexual relations with most of the women in the group and dissolved all the marriages he had previously performed. I don't think it works that way.
No.
Each woman in the group became his plural wife, except for Maurice Grenier, the wife of Jacques Guiguer. Theriault also began to break Seventh-day Adventist taboos, allowing the consumption of meat and alcohol, but only for himself. The group developed new applications of the Hebrew calendar, with New Year's Day beginning on March 21st.
Always found that a little odd.
A Hebrew calendar is much different, but you're going from Seventh-day Adventist to
whatever the fuck this is.
Now the Hebrew calendar.
Yeah, he really started taking religious ideology from everything. At one point, I think he decided to be called king, and his first wife, the queen. It went really bad really fast.
Yeah, if they're ever, to me, again, this and all the jokes we make aside of Seventh-day Adventists are really, they're not lunatics, but these people, it's like, charisma aside, how are you not seeing this? And they keep scratching head. It's like, this seems a lot different than we used to do.
So the massacre at Jonestown on November 18, 1978 brought media attention to the tunic-wearing followers of Moses, labeling them as a cult. The Canadian press drew comparisons between Jim Jones and Theriault, despite no publicly known violence within the Holy Moses Mountain family at that point. However, this increased scrutiny may have contributed to a series of events that occurred in December 1978. So we can all blame it on the press, just like everything else. In December, the group faced several challenges. 2 French members, Gabrielle Lavallee's new husband and her old female friend, were forcibly, repatriated, to France by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police due to expired visas. This incident reduced the group's number from 23 to 15.
Good on you, Mounties.
The Mounties. We got you, eh? Additionally, a conflict arose after Theriault and Claude Ouellette that's very French, were interviewed on Radio Canada on December 11th, 1978. Following the interview, they were followed home and arrested by Sûreté du Québec. Both men were then subjected to psychiatric evaluations at a hospital in Quebec City. Despite Theriault being diagnosed with quote-unquote mystical delusions, which could indicate schizophrenia, the psychologist did not consider him to be dangerous and both men were released 2 days later. He's not dangerous at all.
Also, just to let everyone know, the Sûreté du Québec is almost like the police force of Quebec. They are probably one of the more premier police in Quebec, I believe. Yeah. There's actually a show
Canada that doesn't need police.
Well, somebody's got to keep the mooses in line.
Yeah, because
that's what the Mounties are for.
Yeah. Isn't Canada all love and hugs and stuff?
Exactly. That's at the end of hockey season. Also, ask the Germans in World War I about the lovey-dovey Canadians and why we have a Geneva Convention.
As media attention focused on Theriault's failed apocalypse, there were concerns that the Holy Moses Mountain family might resort to mass suicide. Fearing eviction from their land due to negative media reports, Theriault and Ouellet traveled to Quebec City on March 7, 1979, to meet with a government official. They were assured that they had permission to squat on the crown land at the foot of Mont de l'Eternel. In January 1979, 3 babies were born into the commune, with 20 children being born into the group over the next 12 years, all but 2 of whom were fathered by Roch Theriault. Yeah, so 18 kids.
I think by the time he went...
Oh, he had over 30-something.
No, he had like 20.
The critical date of the prophecy for the end of the war on February 17th, 1979 passed without incident. Really? Theriault explained this failure to his followers by stating that God's time works differently than human time. However, the parents of Chantal Labrie, a member of the group, responded to Theriault's behavior by requesting another psychological examination for their daughter.
So this is the one I was talking about.
Yeah.
This is when the government of Canada is officially starting to push against the cult, and they're starting to kind of the back and forth a little.
In March, the Sûreté Quebec attempted to enter the HMMF commune with a court order for Chantal Labrie, but Theriault refused them entry, which, for those of you that are not aware, that's illegal. He cannot do that.
It always just seemed to amaze me that how much the Canadian government used the kid gloves on them, because I really feel like, I mean, maybe, if this had been in the United States, they would, if say the FBI, they would have been like, FBI, you can't come in. I have a court order. Boom! And just kick the door. Well, there's no real door for them to kick into the woods, but there wouldn't have been like...
Oh, no, they had log cabins that they built.
So at the same time, it's like
blown up their cabins.
The freaking French-Canadian police show up, and it's like, we have a court order. I'm not letting you in. Darn, we can't go in, and they just walk off. It's
okay.
Just wait. It's coming up in a couple paragraphs of what happened to the first compound.
Following a radio interview with Roch Theriault where Roch Theriault discussed his prophecies, the police raided the HMMF commune on April 18th to enforce a court order regarding Chantal Labrie. They seized Chantal and escorted her to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. Theriault and 3 followers were taken to the police station for questioning. While in custody, parents of other members were flown in by police helicopter in an attempt to persuade their adult children to leave the group. Theriault was accused of obstructing justice for disobeying the court order and agreed to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. The evaluation initially deemed him unfit to stand trial, citing mystical delusions and signs of schizophrenia. He was transferred to a psychiatric institution in Quebec City. However, a second evaluation reversed the findings of the first, and Theriault was brought to trial on charges of obstructing justice. He was found guilty but given a suspended sentence. Theriault and Chantal Labrie returned to the HMMF by the end of April. Now, I will say, this suspended sentence on obstructing justice, Canada is a little bit different, but here, obstructing justice, you're going to get at the most 6 months for doing this. Suspended sentences, especially because he's never been convicted of anything before, it's very common to suspend a sentence. They're basically going to give him a slap on the wrist and say, you get arrested for this again, then you're actually doing jail time. During the summers of 1979 and 1980, the Holy Moses Mountain family became a major tourist attraction in the Gaspésie, drawing up to 75 to 100 tourists daily, some staying several nights. This period of prosperity allowed the members to drink alcohol. However, after the failure of Theriault's prophecies and the death of Gabriel Nadeau, a multiple sclerosis patient in October 1979, who had been living in their community, Theriault's charismatic gifts as a prophet and spiritual healer were called into question.
Oh, this guy.
And this is when it started to get really bad after they started questioning him about why the end of the world didn't happen. And he was exerting more control, which meant more abuse.
Now the French Canadian of him comes out. Guy Vere, described as a simpleton in the commune, had recently joined the community. In March 1981, he was tasked with babysitting the quote-unquote impure cast of children, while the quote-unquote pure cast celebrated a visit from Theriault's two oldest sons with a large banquet.
So to clarify what constituted pure and impure, impure were all the children that
were not his.
Basically.
Yes.
That is
his, I believe, his right-hand man.
His best friend, yes.
Yeah.
Everybody else's, they were impure. During this time, 2-year-old Samuel Giguere, cold and hungry, cried and was severely beaten by Vere. Theriault attempted to heal Samuel's wounds through a ritual involving stomach injections and circumcision surgery, which tragically led to an infection and Samuel's death. Oh,
so I believe
he has a stomach ache. Let me cut off a part of his penis.
So I believe the stomach injections, if I remember correctly, it was hydrogen peroxide.
Yep. Yeah. Which does not work.
Yeah, just to let you all know, Theriault's medical knowledge was like kind of skimming an old medical book he probably found at the library.
No, that was his.
Not even.
Yeah, pretty much.
He had no idea what he was doing.
Nope.
God was telling him to do everything.
Nice.
On September 14, 1981, Theriault insisted that Guy Vere stand trial before the HMMF community for causing Samuel Giguere's death. Vere was found guilty and Theriault punished him by castrating him, seen as a purification, and humorously informed him that he was now promoted from slave to eunuch. Vere then fled from the commune, but was intercepted by police who sought his testimony.
And don't think, like, the castration, it was very badly done and he did it completely incorrectly. And all of these surgeries that he does, no pain management, nothing.
So, do you want me to tell you how he actually did it?
Oh, sure.
Do I need to step away?
It's not. I mean, from what you've read, it's not.
Okay.
So, he basically would have taken a rubber band, tied the rubber band right above the balls, and taken whatever knife he had, probably very dull, because they probably didn't sharpen it, probably from wood carving, stuff like that, and just cut them off. For those that don't know, an actual castration, they go in and they remove your ability to produce sperm.
Yeah.
They don't cut anything off. It is surgically removed. He physically cut the balls off.
And still somehow he managed to screw this up.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, it was bad.
In December 1981, police raided the commune, arresting Theriault and seizing all the children, placing them in protective services. 7 members, including Gabrielle Lavallee, who had been trained as a nurse, were charged for their roles in Samuel Giguere's death and Vere's castration. By September 1982, all were found guilty on all counts. 3 were sentenced to prison terms in Quebec City, ranging from 9 months to a year.
Also, just to let everyone know, Vere did not also escape justice, despite the fact that he ran and told the police that. He still went to jail because, guess what? He was
beating children.
Yeah, and he was responsible for one of their deaths. So,
so it was a contributing factor to poor Samuel's death.
Yeah,
but it wasn't what really killed
Theriault.
Is Theriault. So Vere, if I remember right, he was the one that got 6 months.
9 months.
9 months.
Yeah.
He was the one that got 9 months. He was least charged of them because he wasn't charged with the death.
The nurse actually got the most.
Yeah.
Because of her role as a nurse.
And that
should have known better.
And then obviously that means that her license is removed and all of that. She can't practice medicine. By December 1982, the members of the HMMF received an eviction notice from Judge Jean-Roch Roy. Wow, is that French?
Actually, Roy, Jean Rochois. Roy is not, the R is not pronounced in French. It's Wa. I know that because one of the greatest goalies in the NHL is Patrick Waugh. That's how if you look at his jersey, it was Wa, R-O-Y. It is pronounced Wa. I don't know why. I got corrected too many times, so that's why it's ingrained in my brain.
Well, fuck the French Canadians.
You won't get much argument from me.
By January 18, 1983, all members living in the HMMF commune were evicted by forest rangers.
So after they were evicted by the forest rangers did a little arson and set everything on fire.
That's right. I meant to put that in there. I don't know why I cut that out.
It was fire, so I would have to remember fire.
After being released from prison in February 1984, Theriault rejoined his 22 loyal followers, 3 men, 9 women, and then children. On May 2nd, 1984, they left the Gaspé region and traveled westward to Ontario, where they found a plot of land near Burnt River and the Kawartha region. They built a new settlement in a remote clearing in the forest. Upon arriving in Ontario, they applied for social assistance from the provincial welfare, but were rejected. They struggled with subsistence farming and resorted to shoplifting and accepting handouts from neighbors. The group established fruit stands and a bakery selling homemade bread and pastries door to door and at local farmers markets. They adopted the new name, Anthill Kids, for their group, discarding the old title of the Holy Moses Mountain Family. Most of that was to shed all of that past publicity.
And where Anthill came from is when they were building this new commune. Theriault jokingly said, "You guys look like a bunch of ants on an anthill."
Yeah.
Hence, Anthill Kids.
Also, I mean, they're not really by a mountain anymore, so it doesn't really make sense to call them the Moses Mountain Family.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
On January 26, 1985, Gabrielle Lavallee's baby son died of exposure to cold, with the autopsy concluding it was a case of sudden infant death syndrome. SIDS is horrible. And especially in the 80s, they did not know much about SIDS.
I believe with this one, it was Gabrielle didn't want her son to be raised in the cult, and the only thing she could think of doing was put him outside.
Jesus.
Shortly after, a child ran away after a severe beating and reported to Children's Protective Services that he had been sexually assaulted by Moise, which is Theriault. 9 children from the commune were seized by the Ontario Children's Aid Society and placed in foster homes. Theriault's violent behavior escalated after moving to Ontario. He continued to physically punish members and began performing gruesome psychic surgeries, which he justified as magical healings.
Yeah, one of the things I think we're going to cover in a little bit, he would, it shows of faith, he would have people hit their legs with, sledgehammers and things like that. We're at the point of this cult, it is just psychotic behavior. It is real Looney Tunes. You almost have to be there and witness it to actually kind of believe it, because it's really hard to fathom how human beings could subject themselves to this kind of torture and humiliation and think that this is a great thing.
Yeah. On September 29th, 1988, Solange Boilard, one of Theriault's plural wives and his primary wife at the time, complained of a stomachache. In a drunken state, Theriault attempted to perform surgery, removing pieces of her intestines and proclaiming her healed. However, the surgery was botched, and Boilard died painfully. Theriault ordered the group to bury her, then had them dig her body up a few days later. He presided over a series of sex magic rituals in an attempt to bring her back to life. Boilard was exhumed 3 times before her final burial. Theriault kept one of Boilard's bones around his neck concealed under his beard and insisted that his followers wear her bones as amulets. Terrified of his wrath, members began leaving the commune for weeks at a time before returning, often facing punishment.
Yeah.
On November 5th, 1988, Theriault extracted 8 of Gabrielle Lavalley's teeth as a punishment for low pastry sales. Lavalley, considered quote-unquote impure and one of his least favorite wives, returned from visiting her brother. Theriault noticed her stiff finger and punctured her hand with a hunting knife, causing an infection that became gangrenous. Yeah. By July 26, 1989, Theriault decided to amputate Lavalley's hand, but instead enlisted his followers to hold her down while he amputated her whole arm with a chainsaw.
Actually, correction on there, and I meant to correct this, so folks, it's my apologies. It wasn't a chainsaw, it was a blunt axe. He more or less broke her arm before he actually was able to sever it. So, chainsaw actually might have been more merciful. It actually was just cut through the way he did it.
Following this, Lavalley decided to escape and made plans to leave the group. On August 14th, she hitchhiked to the nearest hospital where she was interviewed by the police. Her escape and the subsequent investigation led to a wave of defections from the commune. Theriault hid in the woods for several weeks, evading police who were searching for him with dog teams and helicopters. He was finally arrested on October 6, 1989, and charged with the second-degree murder of Solange Boillard. He pleaded guilty to the murder and to the aggravated assault charge from cutting off Gabrielle Lavalley's arm and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. After an appeal, Roch Theriault was sentenced to life in prison in 1993. 3 of his wives, Francine Laflamme, Chantal Labrie, and Nicole Ruel, moved to New Brunswick to continue following their spiritual master, Moise, while he was incarcerated. During conjugal visits in prison, the 3 wives gave birth to 4 babies who were promptly seized by Child Protective Services and put up for adoption. In 2000, Theriault was transferred to a medium-security prison in Dorchester, New Brunswick. 2 years later, he applied for parole, but it was rejected. Theriault attempted to sell his prison artwork, poetry, and ritual paraphernalia, including his quote-unquote Moses rod, on a United States-based website, murderauction.com, in 2009. This sparked controversy, and Canada's Public Safety Minister, Stockwell Day, expressed concern that a killer would benefit from his crimes. The Correctional Service of Canada then blocked Theriault's artworks from leaving the premises of Dorchester Penitentiary. On February 26, 2011, Theriault was stabbed by his cellmate, Matthew Gerard MacDonald, also a convicted murderer, at Dorchester Penitentiary. Theriault died at the age of 63. It is interesting to note that for most of this cult's existence, Theriault preached that the world would end in February. Indeed, it seemed that while the rest of the world carried on, Theriault would come to an end in a February.
So the thing with his cellmate, the reason why he finally snapped and stabbed him was because Theriault was talking about everything he did to the women and children of the cult.
Yeah. He
finally snapped, stabbed him, walked to a guard, handed him the shiv, yep, and said, almost like that piece of shit is down the range.
Yep.
He's dead. You can take him out now.
So, and then we're going to wrap up with just going over the doctrines, beliefs, the structure, stuff like that. So,
and his followers that, after, even though he was life in prison, after he died, all of his followers actually breathed a sigh of relief because they were terrified he was going to get out.
Yep. Roch Theriault's new religious movement emerged from the Seventh-day Adventists in Thetford, Quebec. After being expelled from the SDA Church, his group retained many of its original Adventist features. They maintained a vegetarian diet with no alcohol as a way to achieve holistic health. The group also focused on millennial expectations, influenced by Theriault's prophecies, such as his prediction that the world would end on February 17, 1979. They followed the Jewish lunar calendar for their celebrations, with Saturday as their Sabbath day. Theriault rejected Quebec's ultramontane Catholicism, likely influenced by his father's integrist Catholic background, and downplayed the importance of the New Testament, Jesus, and the Virgin Mary.
Oh, yes. Another thing is that he took from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Nothing
which obviously does not apply to anybody now. It applies to Jews and Gentiles.
There's no room in the cult for anyone other but him.
Yeah.
No Jesus, no anything.
The central belief of Theriault's followers was in Theriault himself as God's chosen prophet, receiving ongoing revelations. By claiming to be the contemporary spiritual counterpart of the Old Testament Hebrew prophet Moses, he endowed his followers with the sacred identity of the ancient Israelites led out of Egypt in slavery. This narrative dominated their communal rural life, with the outside society viewed as Egypt, and its modern living described as slavery due to technology, trouble, noise, and tension. Theriault regularly provided proofs of his prophetic status through sharing his dreams, visions, and predictions about the world's destruction, as well as minor healing miracles. As a religious rationale for his practice of polygamy, Theriault cited examples from the Old Testament of prophets, such as Abraham, Solomon, Jacob, and Isaiah, who had plural wives. Now, their rituals and practices...
Before we get into that, okay, one thing, this is viewer discretion. We know we said at the beginning, but I'll just say it again. Toward the end, there's going to be some very graphic detailing, so buckle up.
Listen, you've already come this far, don't go away.
Pretty much.
After Theriault's expulsion from the SDA Church in April 1978, the group retreated to the forest of the Gaspé. There, each member underwent a naming ceremony where Hebrew names were written on slips of paper picked out of a hat by Theriault and bestowed on each member. This symbolized their rebirth into the group and signified a shift in their identity as the new children of God who would survive the apocalypse.
You think they tried to trade names and somebody could be like, who'd you get? I got Josiah. What about you?
I want to be Solomon.
Trade you.
Man, can I be Arafat? It's a mountain. Mount Arafat. It's where the Noah's ship ended up. The ark ended up being stuck on. The group began celebrating new Jewish holidays that emphasized nature worship over Christianity, including planting and harvest festivals and winter-summer solstices. They also held an annual Exodus celebration on the date of their arrival in the Gaspé. This sounds a lot like paganism. Harvest festivals, winter and summer solstices. Group confessions were a significant practice, initially focusing on drug use and psychological problems during the Healthy Living Clinic days, and later on in sins and breaking commune rules during the HMMF phase. While living in Sainte Marie, the group held vegetarian banquets for the sick and poor, intending to demonstrate their sanctity as saviors to the common people. Theriault periodically performed magical healing rituals, often while in an inebriated state. His attempts at psychic surgery resulted in the deaths or maiming of several of his followers. There were many other disciplinary practices Theriault used. He forced commune members to break their own legs with sledgehammers, to shoot each other in the shoulders, eating their own and others' feces, insects, and rats. He would nail children to a tree and force other children to throw rocks at them. He would forcibly remove teeth and nails. He would burn his followers by making them sit on lit stoves. He would cut off arms and legs without warning. He made them sit naked in the cold and whip and beat them. Nothing was too cruel a punishment. However, Theriault's pièce de résistance came when one of his followers complained of pain in the abdomen. Theriault forced her to undress, laid her on the kitchen table, punched her in the stomach, performed an enema by shoving a tube up her rectum, and filled her up with olive oil.
Oh, and there was also molasses in that.
Then he cut her stomach open, ripped out part of her intestines with his bare hands, and he forced another member to stitch her up. Then he shoved a tube down her throat and made the other women blow air into it. Unsurprisingly, the woman died the next day. Of course, Theriault, as a prophet, had the powers of resurrection. This resurrection consisted of drilling a hole in the dead woman's skull and having every male member ejaculate into it. The woman remained dead.
Yeah, and then, because she didn't resurrect, he, and I believe some of the men, all wore a piece of her rib.
Yes,
that was not this woman. That was
this was this woman.
That was his wife.
That was this one.
That was this woman.
he brought her back from the dead unburied her 4 times.
Yeah, that's this one.
So Roch Theriault's commune, known as the Anthill Kids, was organized around communal living in log cabins and central lodge and remote forest clearings. Theriault practiced polygamy, being married to all the women in the group, while the former husbands lived as celibate monks. An exception was made for Theriault's right-hand man, Jacques Guiguer, who lived monogamously with his wife, Maurice. Children born into the commune were taken from their parents at a young age and raised by Theriault's head wife, Giselle France, often without seeing their parents for extended periods. In 1978, the group began to wear linen tunics to signify humility and equality, with different colors denoting different roles. Theriault and his 2 oldest sons wore brown tunics decorated with regal embroidery symbolizing their status. The group's identity shifted from an ancient Hebrew tribe to a medieval court, with Theriault as the king and La France as the queen, and Guy Vere as the fool and later the eunuch. As a group transitioned to being called the Anthill Kids in Ontario, a 2-caste system developed. Members favored by Theriault were considered pure, while others were deemed impure and faced inferior living conditions, poor diet, and demanding work. Pure members lived closer to Theriault and participated in festive banquets. Theriault initially attracted followers through Bible study classes, but over time his teaching shifted to include his own ideas, dreams, and visions, moving away from traditional scripture. This shift in focus contributed to the transformation of the group's beliefs and practices over time.
And that is the Anthill cult.
So, Anthill Kids were...
I hate you for not giving me the viewer discretion before I started reading.
I really, after I was done writing this, I felt the need to drink.
Yeah, I felt dirty.
So, yeah. Theriault was a big piece of shit. He deserved to be castrated himself. Anthill Kids is probably one of the more brutal cults in history. I would say even worse than the Jonestown. And yeah, so we are this was a brutal one, probably the most brutal cult that we will have. But it's one that's not talked about much, which is why I wanted to do it. So we have a few cults coming up next. We're doing the Unification Church. We're doing Fiat Lux, Nexium, and then we will get away from the cults for a little bit and start moving on to serial killers. And having some fun with some serial killers.
Viewer discretion advised for moi, please.
Ed Kemper is...
I know that was...
partially viewer discretion. He's not...
Oh, I'm talking about like our next couple episodes.
Unification Church isn't that bad. Fiat Lux didn't have really any brutality like that. Nexium is the viewer discretion. That is the most recent cult. That is...
I know which one that is. Babe,
that is where we have a famous celebrity that was involved with them.
Yeah.
It was a sex cult. Then we'll be moving on to Ed Kemper, one of my favorites. Then the first female serial killer that we're going to cover, Eileen Wuornos. Then we'll hit Mickey Dawn Jackson and quite a few things, and some hauntings and stuff like that. So we've got quite a few lists for season 2 that we have some good stuff coming up. So we want to thank everybody for listening, and we want to thank you for visiting the Scarlet Tavern. Remember to turn in your glasses, push in your seat, and as always, tip the bard. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.